My name is Nathan Cole, and I found out my wife was engaged again, only this time, not to me. It happened on a quiet Wednesday afternoon, the kind that slides by unnoticed. I was at my desk, grading papers with a half-empty mug of coffee and the hum of the ceiling fan overhead. That's when the email arrived. Subject line, "Congratulations to the future Mrs. Evelyn Hartman." Evelyn. My wife. Evelyn Cole. The email had been sent by mistake, I think, a group announcement from some wedding planning site. It was addressed to dozens of people. Friends. Family. Vendors. I scrolled down, breath caught in my chest. A venue reservation in Asheville, North Carolina. A save the date. A smiling photo of her, cheek pressed against a man I'd never seen before, tall, tan, polished. One hand on her waist. The other holding her left hand. The same hand I had slid a ring onto 10 years ago. I just stared at the screen. My mouth went dry. I reread it 3 times. It made no sense. None. Evelyn was in Boston. That morning, she'd kissed me goodbye before heading off to her client meeting. She said she'd be back Friday. But here she was, in lace and sunlight, wearing another man's ring. I didn't react. Not at first. I didn't shout. Didn't cry. I just sat there, perfectly still, like if I didn't move, the truth wouldn't either. Then I picked up the phone and called her. Voicemail. Again. Voicemail. The 3rd time, I didn't leave a message. I just stared at the photo. Zoomed in. Her smile wasn't fake. It wasn't confused or unsure. It was effortless. Happy. That's when I stood up, grabbed my coat, and walked out of the house without a plan. I didn't know where I was going. But I knew one thing, Evelyn had another life. And I was going to find it. Before she became 2 people, Evelyn was mine. Entirely, devastatingly mine. We met in the middle of winter, Boston, 2011. I was 28, a grad student juggling lectures and caffeine, scraping together a living as a part-time writing tutor. Evelyn walked into the campus cafe where I worked most afternoons, a red wool coat dusted with snow, earbuds in, lost in her world. She ordered a chai latte and sat at the window with a leather-bound planner and a copy of the bell jar she never opened. She looked expensive. Not in a designer way, but in the way she moved, carefully, purposefully, like she'd been raised to believe the world would lean in to listen when she spoke. Evelyn was the kind of woman who made you fix your posture. Even her silences had structure. She was tall, nearly my height, with long, dark auburn hair she wore in loose waves that always smelled like rosemary and bergamot. Freckles scattered across the bridge of her nose, and she had this way of smiling with only one side of her mouth, like she knew more than you and didn't mind letting you feel it. Her style was simple, but sharp, always tailored, always precise. Silk blouses in earth tones. High-waisted trousers. Blazers with gold buttons. Her jewelry never clinked or caught light too loudly. Pearl studs. A thin rose gold watch. Sometimes a scarf tied at the neck, just enough to make her look a little foreign. Parisian, maybe. Or out of another decade. I fell fast. We talked the next week, accidentally, or so I thought. She'd forgotten her gloves at the counter, and I chased after her. She smiled like she'd been waiting for me to notice. We had coffee. Then more coffee. Then dinner. Then something that looked like a future. Evelyn was fiercely intelligent. She worked in nonprofit strategy, consulting, grant development, that sort of thing. Her mind was always working, categorizing, solving, making lists. Even on Sunday mornings, curled next to me in bed, she'd reach over, grab her notebook from the nightstand, and write in looping script things to tackle before noon. She read the New Yorker cover to cover. She could hold her own in a room full of investment bankers or painters or dog walkers and never once seem like she didn't belong. She liked Spanish reds, medium rare steak, vintage jazz, and rainy walks with no umbrella. She hated clutter, reality TV, and people who laughed too loudly in restaurants. I was all right with that. I'd have quieted the whole world for her. In the beginning, we were solid. We built a rhythm. Long dinners. Sunday markets. We moved into a brownstone apartment near Beacon Hill. It had brick walls and a skylight in the kitchen. She loved that skylight. The little things became rituals. I'd leave her notes in her shoes when she traveled. She'd send me postcards from 5 miles away. We had our own language, full of half-sentences and sideways glances. She called me Nate only when she was serious, which was rare. Mostly it was handsome, or professor, or simply, you. And God, I loved her. I loved how she stretched her arms above her head when she yawned. I loved how she double-knotted her running shoes. I loved how she said, no, when she meant, absolutely not, and how she kissed me like she was making a promise she didn't know how to keep. For a long time, we worked. But cracks, they don't show up like earthquakes. They creep in like mold, quiet, slow, and unassuming. She started traveling more. Conferences, speaking engagements, board retreats. She'd leave on Thursdays and come back Sundays with new scarves, foreign chocolate, and eyes that looked like they hadn't quite made it home. I chalked it up to stress. Her job was demanding. Her ambition was relentless. I didn't want to cage her. I just wanted her to remember that I was the one she chose. I suppose I ignored the signs because love makes you stupid. Or hopeful. Sometimes both. I noticed the new lingerie in the laundry, tags I hadn't seen before. The cologne on her scarf that wasn't mine. The sudden change in her password. I asked once, is everything okay? She smiled, touched my face, said I was imagining things. That I was being sensitive. And when Evelyn used that tone, that cool, amused, almost maternal tone, I believed her. Because it was easier than the alternative. I thought she was still mine. I had no idea she was building a second life in Asheville. Wearing the same smile I once thought belonged only to me. You don't realize how much of your life is routine until you start questioning everything inside it. That night, after the email, I couldn't sleep. I lay on top of the covers with my clothes still on, the room dark but my mind lit up like a crime scene. The soft ticking of the clock, Evelyn's empty pillow beside me, the faint scent of her shampoo on the sheets, it all felt like evidence. Like something I needed to catalog before it disappeared. I opened my laptop again, stared at the email. Zoomed in on the photo. Her head tilted just slightly toward the man beside her. She looked younger in the picture, or maybe just lighter, freer. She was wearing a cream dress I'd never seen before. Lace. Fitted at the waist. Elegant. Her hair was pinned up, exposing the slender line of her neck. The man's hand was resting just at the curve of her hip, his fingers too familiar, too easy there. He was maybe 40. Fit. Well-groomed beard. That kind of controlled charm you see in real estate ads or political campaigns. His name, according to the announcement, was Daniel Cross. A consultant, like Evelyn. They were getting married at the Willow House Inn, a wedding venue tucked in the Blue Ridge Mountains. The date? 3 weeks from now. 3 weeks. While I thought we were still building a life. I couldn't wrap my head around it. Evelyn hadn't filed for divorce. She hadn't moved out. Her clothes were still hanging in our closet. Her toothbrush still in the cup beside mine. But in Asheville, she was someone else's fiancée. I went through everything. Her planner, her travel itineraries, her expense reports. I opened drawers I never touched. Her inbox. Her call logs. I wasn't proud of it, but when someone takes a knife to your reality, pride becomes a luxury. The signs were there. Carefully buried, but visible once you knew what to look for. Her trips had a pattern, every other Thursday to Sunday, always to D.C. or San Francisco. But the flight receipts didn't match. The boarding passes she left in her coat pockets were from Charlotte, sometimes Knoxville. Asheville was a short drive from both. One night in December, she told me she'd missed her flight home due to a snowstorm. She sent a blurry photo of an airport terminal as proof. I remembered the night well. I had fallen asleep on the couch waiting for her. But when I reverse image searched that photo, it came up in a Google results page under Winter Weather Delays O'Hare 2017. She had lied. Not just once. Systematically. And somehow, she was pulling it off. The next morning, I couldn't look at myself in the mirror. Not because I'd snooped. But because I'd believed her for so long. Because I'd ignored every gut feeling, every moment she'd looked through me like I was glass, every time she came home with hotel soap in her purse. I took the day off from work. Told my department chair I had the flu. Then I booked a one-way ticket to Asheville. I didn't tell anyone. I needed to see it for myself. I needed to know if she really was capable of standing in front of another man, in a white dress, under a canopy of flowers, and saying yes while I was still sleeping beside her 2 nights a week. The flight was quiet. I stared out the window as Boston disappeared below us, shrinking into patches of gray and white. My thoughts were a blur of images, our wedding in Vermont, Evelyn crying as she read her vows, the way she'd curled into me after the reception and whispered, "You're the safest place I've ever known." Did she forget that? Or did she lie even then? When I landed, I rented a car. A black Nissan with a faint smell of cherry air freshener. I drove into the mountains without a plan, my GPS guiding me to the address listed on the wedding registry, the Willow House Inn, 112, Highland Crest Road. It was nestled in a clearing surrounded by pine. White fences. A wide porch. Wisteria vines clinging to trellises. It looked like a fairy tale. Like someone's dream of happiness. And for a moment, I couldn't breathe. She had picked this place. Not for us. For him. I parked a few blocks away, out of sight. Walked the perimeter, my heart thudding like it didn't know how to beat anymore. I was shaking. Not from rage, at least, not entirely. But from something deeper. Something slower. The quiet horror of watching the love of your life become a stranger. I found a brochure on the gate. The names were printed in silver cursive, Evelyn Hartman and Daniel Cross. No mention of Evelyn Cole. No sign she had ever been someone's wife before. That was when I knew, she wasn't cheating. She was starting over. From scratch. As if I never existed. You think you're prepared for a confrontation until you're standing in front of the man who's unknowingly wearing your ring. I didn't sleep that night in Asheville. I rented a modest room at a roadside inn, the kind with a flickering vacancy sign and threadbare sheets. I lay awake, the ceiling fan spinning above me like a clock that wouldn't tick forward. Outside, a dog barked. A train passed in the distance. My mind replayed the photo of Evelyn and Daniel on a loop, each frame a small incision. At dawn, I dressed in silence, my movements slow, methodical, jeans, boots, the navy sweater Evelyn once said brought out my eyes. I wasn't sure why I chose it. Maybe some part of me still wanted her to look at me and remember. The Willow House Inn opened at 9 for bridal consultations. I arrived at 8:30. The grounds were still. A light fog curled over the lawn, and the gravel crunched softly beneath my boots as I crossed the parking lot. The main hall was a renovated farmhouse, white clapboard, black shutters, a wraparound porch. Through the wide bay window, I saw a man standing at the counter with a clipboard, speaking with a wedding coordinator. Daniel Cross. Up close, he looked exactly as I expected, well-dressed, confident, deeply unaware. He wore a slate gray wool coat and a watch that gleamed under the soft light. His hair was slightly damp, like he'd just come from a morning run. He was leaning over the counter, nodding at some floral arrangement sketch, entirely at ease in the life that belonged to me. I didn't knock. I opened the door and stepped inside. The wedding planner looked up first, then Daniel. For a second, he squinted like he was trying to place me. I could see the shift in his face, the flicker of tension beneath the surface. "Can I help you?" he asked. I didn't answer him right away. I looked around the room. Bouquets in glass vases. Color palettes pinned to cork boards. A fitting room door slightly ajar, with white tulle spilling out like a secret. The whole place reeked of beginnings. "I'm looking for Evelyn," I said. Daniel's brow furrowed. "She's not here yet." "Can I ask, who are you?" I turned to face him. There was a tremor in my chest, but I kept my voice level. "I'm Nathan Cole." The silence was immediate. His posture straightened. I watched the pieces start to fall into place behind his eyes, the flickers of confusion, of wariness. And then, just a whisper of doubt. "Cole," he repeated. "Evelyn's ex-husband." I gave a faint, humorless smile. "No, Daniel. Her current husband." The color drained from his face. The wedding planner quietly excused herself, the air behind her rippling like a curtain being pulled shut. Daniel opened his mouth, then closed it. "You're lying," he said quietly, but there was no conviction behind it. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out my wallet. Slid out the photo we'd taken in Lisbon 4 years ago, Evelyn and me on a balcony, wind in her hair, her hand on my chest, our wedding rings catching the sun. "She's been married to me for 10 years, I said. "She left Boston 2 days ago. Told me she was in D.C. for a client meeting. And yet, here we are." Daniel's hands were clenched. He didn't look angry. He looked wounded, like someone had knocked the wind out of him. I don't understand," he said. "She told me she was divorced. That you left her. Years ago. That you were unstable." I let out a bitter laugh. "Unstable. That's a new one." We stood in silence for a moment. Two men with the same woman stitched into our lives in different threads. I couldn't hate him, not yet. He wasn't the architect of this. He was another casualty. The bell above the door chimed. We both turned. Evelyn walked in, holding a coffee in one hand and her phone in the other. Her coat was camel wool, cinched at the waist with a belt. Her hair was twisted into a perfect knot. She looked radiant. Until she saw me. She stopped mid-step. Her mouth parted slightly. Her pupils dilated. The color in her cheeks vanished. "Nate," she breathed. "Hello, Evelyn," I said. My voice was calm. My hands weren't. Daniel stepped forward. "Is it true?" he asked her, voice cracking. "Are you married?" She looked between us like someone trapped between two tides. Daniel, I was going to tell you. I was going to explain everything." "When?" I snapped. "Before or after you said, 'I do'?" "I didn't mean for it to go this far," she said. "I was going to leave." "Leave?" I repeated. "You were going to leave me?" "Evelyn, you didn't just cheat. You built a new life. You're engaged. You have another name." She folded her arms around herself, small, defensive. "You don't understand." "Then explain it," Daniel said, and the pain in his voice was unbearable. "Explain it to both of us." She opened her mouth. Closed it. And then the tears came. Not loud. Not performative. Just silent, streaking down a face that once swore to love me forever. I didn't move toward her. Neither did Daniel. In that moment, none of us belonged to each other. We were 3 points on a triangle collapsing inward. When the truth finally comes, it doesn't arrive with fire and thunder. It slips in quietly, with trembling lips and eyes that can't hold your gaze. Evelyn sat down on the edge of one of the window benches, her coat still on, coffee untouched, hands clasped in her lap like a schoolgirl waiting to be reprimanded. Her eyes, usually so sharp, so composed, fluttered from me to Daniel and then down to the polished hardwood floor, as if the answer to everything she'd done was buried in the grain. The room was quiet except for the sound of her breath. Shallow. Uneven. "I didn't plan for this," she said finally. It was Daniel who spoke first. "But you did it anyway." "I didn't think I'd fall for you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I thought it would be a clean escape. Just a version of myself I could try on for a little while. I didn't expect you to be real." I turned my face toward the window so she couldn't see me flinch. She had called our life real once, too. "Then who am I?" I asked. "Some anchor you outgrew? A part of your past self you forgot to let die before you started planning weddings in the mountains?" Evelyn's lips trembled, but she didn't cry again. "No, Nathan. You were the only thing holding me together for years. You made me feel safe. You always have." Daniel let out a short, bitter laugh. "Is this your version of love, Evelyn? Safety with one man, passion with another. Lies to both." She looked at him, really looked, and I watched her soul fracture in real time. "I was drowning," she said. "In Boston, in my job, in the version of myself I'd constructed, always composed, always efficient. You remember, Nate. I couldn't breathe. You didn't see it because I didn't let you. I couldn't let you. You were always the strong one. The steady one. I needed to be worthy of you." I stepped forward, not out of anger, but something colder. "So you created someone new?" She nodded slowly. "Her name is Evelyn Hartman. She drinks lattes instead of espresso. She wears linen and smiles more. She doesn't carry the weight of every unfinished expectation. And her voice caught, she doesn't have to remember all the ways she failed to be enough." "Enough for who?" I asked, voice low. "For me," she said. "I wasn't trying to hurt you. I was trying to find something that felt like living." Daniel looked at her, eyes hard. "And what was I?" "Your weekend escape. A man you used to test the edges of your freedom." "No," she said, almost desperately. "I loved you. I do. Just, not with the same roots." He stepped back like she'd struck him. As for me, I didn't feel rage, or even betrayal in that moment. I felt emptied. I had rehearsed this confrontation 100 ways on the flight down. I had imagined screaming, imagined storming out, imagined collapsing. But instead, I felt as if I were watching it all through glass, like the man she spoke to was someone else. I leaned against the edge of the counter. "Why didn't you just tell me you wanted to leave?" Her voice softened. "Because part of me didn't. I still loved you, Nathan. I still do. Just, differently." "Differently," I repeated. "Is that what we're calling it now?" She didn't respond. There was no answer that wouldn't cheapen us further. Daniel sat down across from her, elbows on his knees, his jaw clenched so tight it looked like it might snap. "You wore the ring I gave you while you were still married to another man. You made me believe I was the only one. I wanted to be," she said. "But you weren't," I whispered. And there it was. The final blow. We sat in silence for what felt like a lifetime. She eventually took off the engagement ring and placed it gently on the table between us. The sound it made was soft, but it echoed through me like thunder. "I can't marry you," she said to Daniel, eyes red. "Not like this. Not after this." "And me?" I asked. "What do you want from me?" She shook her head slowly. Nothing. I don't deserve anything from you. Not your forgiveness. Not your time. I just wanted you to know that it wasn't because you weren't enough. You were too much, maybe. Too good. And I got lost trying to live up to you. For the first time in my life, I had nothing left to say. Daniel stood and walked toward the door without another word. He didn't look back. Evelyn stayed seated, her fingers still resting lightly on the edge of the table where the ring had been. I turned toward the exit. Nathan, she said behind me, a tremor in her voice. I'm sorry. I paused, hand on the doorframe, and let the silence answer for me. Then I stepped out into the cold Asheville air, and left the woman I married inside a house built for someone else. The strangest part about heartbreak is how quietly life continues after it. 2 days after I left the Willow House Inn, I stood alone on a hiking trail just outside Asheville, high enough that the fog below looked like a sea swallowing the world I used to know. The mountains rolled in layers of blue and silence. I hadn't told anyone where I was, not my friends, not my department chair, not even my sister. I'd sent one text to Evelyn, I won't be home when you get back. Please don't try to find me. I wasn't trying to disappear. I just needed space to breathe in a world that had shifted underneath me. The first night after the confrontation, I stayed in a motel with paper-thin walls and a busted heater. I didn't sleep. I lay awake and tried to rearrange my life like puzzle pieces on a table, only to realize I didn't know what the picture was anymore. Was I a husband? Was I a fool? Was I both? I remembered our wedding. Evelyn had worn her hair down in soft waves, no veil, no fuss. She said she wanted to look like herself. We had danced barefoot under string lights in her uncle's backyard, just 25 people and a jazz quartet. She told me, that night, in a voice barely above a whisper, I've never felt safer in the world than I do right now. And I believed her. That's the thing about love. You don't measure it in truths. You measure it in the lies you never imagined possible. I stayed in Asheville for 3 more days. I didn't reach out to Evelyn, and she didn't reach out to me. I think, in her own way, she knew the silence was all I had left to give her. I walked a lot. Through the city, through the woods, through my own memories. On the 4th day, I packed my bag and drove back to Boston. When I got home, Evelyn was gone. Her key was on the kitchen counter. Her closet was empty. Half the hangers still swung gently like they hadn't yet accepted the vacancy. The fridge had been cleaned out, the sheets on the bed changed. There was no note, no goodbye, no explanation. Just absence, pure and echoing. I stood in the center of our bedroom and stared at the space where her jewelry box used to sit, and I let myself cry. Not just for her, but for the version of me who thought love alone would be enough. The days blurred after that. I took a leave from the university. Told them I needed time. They didn't press. I think the hollowness in my voice did the talking for me. I started rebuilding, slowly. I donated half our furniture. Repainted the living room. Took down every framed photo except one, Lisbon, 4 years ago. The one where her hand rests on my chest, and I'm smiling like a man who doesn't know the future's already unraveling beneath his feet. I didn't keep it to remember her. I kept it to remember me, the man who loved without armor. About a month later, I got a letter in the mail. No return address. Just my name on the front, in handwriting I knew like my own. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Evelyn's voice, measured and clean, written in blue ink. Nathan. I won't ask for forgiveness, and I won't try to explain what's already been laid bare. But I need you to know that you weren't a chapter one outgrew. You were the foundation of every good thing I tried to build. I failed you. I failed myself. I don't expect redemption, but I am grateful. For every quiet morning. Every note in my shoes. Every time you saw me better than I saw myself. I've started therapy. I'm living in Vermont. No more aliases, no more hiding. I'm trying to be whole, truly whole, for the first time in my life. I loved you. And that love was real. Even if I wasn't ready to be the person it asked me to be. Thank you. E. I didn't write back. There was nothing left to say. But I folded the letter and placed it in the back of a book she once gifted me, Letters to a Young Poet. Her favorite. Some nights, I still wake up reaching for her out of habit. But then I remember, she's not mine anymore. Maybe she never truly was. I started jogging again. I read more. I got coffee with friends who had stopped inviting me out years ago when Evelyn and I became an island. And one morning, I stood in my kitchen, barefoot, sipping coffee, and realized something that startled me. I wasn't waiting anymore. Not for her to walk through the door. Not for closure. Not even for healing. I had already begun. It doesn't happen all at once. Healing isn't a grand awakening. It's a series of quiet moments where you stop bleeding and start breathing again. I used to believe that betrayal broke you. That once someone you love looks you in the eye and lies, something inside you cracks in a way that can't be repaired. And maybe that's true, for a while. But over time, you learn the difference between being broken and being reshaped. Evelyn's betrayal didn't destroy me. It revealed me. For so long, I had built my life around the idea that loyalty was the same thing as love. That if I gave her everything, patience, support, silence when she needed it, conversation when she didn't, that somehow, that would be enough to hold us together. That if I was dependable, I'd be unforgettable. But the truth is, I had disappeared inside our marriage long before she left. And the worst part? I let it happen. I stopped asking what I needed. I let her schedule dictate my days. I planned around her dreams. I celebrated her wins more than my own. I shrank myself down to fit into the spaces she left vacant. I told myself that love meant sacrifice, and I never stopped to ask, shouldn't it also mean being seen? After everything, I had to relearn how to take up space in my own life. I joined a local writers group, something I hadn't done since grad school. I started volunteering at a community center on Saturdays. I took a trip to Iceland alone, just to prove to myself that I could. And somewhere between the long walks, the late-night journal entries, and the quiet dinners at my own kitchen table, I began to feel whole again. Not because someone returned to fill the empty place beside me, but because I stopped waiting for them to. I won't pretend it's a perfect story. I still flinch when I see couples laughing in airports. I still dream about Evelyn sometimes, small dreams, like running into her in a bookstore or seeing her across a crowded room. In those dreams, she always smiles. She always looks like someone I once loved. And that's the truth, I did love her. I loved her deeply. I won't erase that. But now I love someone else, too. Me. I love that I survived. I love that I didn't turn bitter. I love that I can walk past the Willow House brochure still buried in my drawer and not feel like my lungs are collapsing. I love that I gave everything I had, and when it wasn't enough, I didn't let it make me smaller. I let it set me free. The day I finally took off my wedding ring, it wasn't dramatic. I didn't throw it into a river or bury it under a tree. I simply stood in my bathroom, slipped it off, and held it in my palm for a long time. It was lighter than I remembered. As if it had been hollow for years. I placed it in a box. Not out of spite. But out of peace. Letting go doesn't always look like a final word or a slammed door. Sometimes it looks like walking away from the version of yourself who waited too long to be chosen. I still believe in love. Fiercely. But not the kind that asks you to vanish. Not the kind that's conditional on how small you can become. I believe in a love that meets you as you are. That doesn't require a second name in a second city to feel alive. That doesn't confuse freedom with escape, or passion with secrecy. A love where both people stand side by side, whole. Maybe I'll find that again someday. And if I don't? I've already found myself. And that's a beginning I wouldn't trade for anything. Nathan Cole. Boston, April 1st. The sky's finally clear. And I'm still here. It doesn't happen all at once. Healing isn't a grand awakening. It's a series of quiet moments where you stop bleeding and start breathing again. I used to believe that betrayal broke you. That once someone you love looks you in the eye and lies, something inside you cracks in a way that can't be repaired. And maybe that's true, for a while. But over time, you learn the difference between being broken and being reshaped. Evelyn's betrayal didn't destroy me. It revealed me. For so long, I had built my life around the idea that loyalty was the same thing as love. That if I gave her everything, patience, support, silence when she needed it, conversation when she didn't, that somehow, that would be enough to hold us together. That if I was dependable, I'd be unforgettable. But the truth is, I had disappeared inside our marriage long before she left. And the worst part? I let it happen. I stopped asking what I needed. I let her schedule dictate my days. I planned around her dreams. I celebrated her wins more than my own. I shrank myself down to fit into the spaces she left vacant. I told myself that love meant sacrifice, and I never stopped to ask, shouldn't it also mean being seen? After everything, I had to relearn how to take up space in my own life. I joined a local writers group, something I hadn't done since grad school. I started volunteering at a community center on Saturdays. I took a trip to Iceland alone, just to prove to myself that I could. And somewhere between the long walks, the late-night journal entries, and the quiet dinners at my own kitchen table, I began to feel whole again. Not because someone returned to fill the empty place beside me, but because I stopped waiting for them to. I won't pretend it's a perfect story. I still flinch when I see couples laughing in airports. I still dream about Evelyn sometimes, small dreams, like running into her in a bookstore or seeing her across a crowded room. In those dreams, she always smiles. She always looks like someone I once loved. And that's the truth, I did love her. I loved her deeply. I won't erase that. But now I love someone else, too. Me. I love that I survived. I love that I didn't turn bitter. I love that I can walk past the Willow House brochure still buried in my drawer and not feel like my lungs are collapsing. I love that I gave everything I had, and when it wasn't enough, I didn't let it make me smaller. I let it set me free. The day I finally took off my wedding ring, it wasn't dramatic. I didn't throw it into a river or bury it under a tree. I simply stood in my bathroom, slipped it off, and held it in my palm for a long time. It was lighter than I remembered. As if it had been hollow for years. I placed it in a box. Not out of spite. But out of peace. Letting go doesn't always look like a final word or a slammed door. Sometimes it looks like walking away from the version of yourself who waited too long to be chosen. I still believe in love. Fiercely. But not the kind that asks you to vanish. Not the kind that's conditional on how small you can become. I believe in a love that meets you as you are. That doesn't require a second name in a second city to feel alive. That doesn't confuse freedom with escape, or passion with secrecy. A love where both people stand side by side, whole. Maybe I'll find that again someday. And if I don't? I've already found myself. And that's a beginning I wouldn't trade for anything. Nathan Cole. Boston, April 1st. The sky's finally clear. And I'm still here.